Well, hello everyone. Today we've got attendees from across the US, from South America, and from across Europe. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And welcome to this webinar on investing in the engineering software sector. My name's Tony Christian, and I'm with industry analyst firm Cambashi. And I'm joined today by Joe Walsh from Intrinsim, a firm involved in many aspects of engineering software, from technology assessments through to advising vendors on business strategy. We'll set the scene first in terms of what we mean by the engineering software market, why we think it's an attractive sector for investors, and then the factors, both qualitative and quantitative, that we would suggest must be taken into account when building a full picture of the market. Then we'll take a dive into the quantitative dimension of market analysis and look at the different perspectives that are important in positioning an engineering software vendor and in determining its future prospects. Then at that point, I'll hand over to Joe to discuss the importance of domain knowledge and then how the ISPES program works. Finally, we hope to have time for some question and answers, although I've wasted a bit there. But if you have a question at any time, please use the question panel on your screen to send it to us. We do want to keep as closely as possible to our planned time, so as not to disrupt anyone's schedule. But if there are any questions that we don't get to, we'll certainly respond by email. So first of all, I'd like to start with an attempt to scope the engineering software market, and would suggest that there are 4 dimensions to consider. The first is the range of applications that it covers. We see the term engineering software as covering the applications used by engineers and designers in manufacturing, architecture, construction, utilities, and other sectors where computer-based design aids provide valuable, if not essential, capabilities. So this includes CAD, CAM, CAE, PLM in manufacturing industries, BIM in architecture, engineering, and construction, itself, of course, usually shortened to AEC, and GIS for geospatial applications. We're also seeing the use of applications like visual effects growing among designers that want to create realistic visualizations of new products or structures. And a newer growth area of the market with a trend towards smart devices, and dare I suggest it, the Internet of Things bandwagon, is that involving tools used for development of embedded software, which we've bundled here under yet another acronym, ALM, or Application Lifecycle Management. The second dimension of market scope is the range of industries that use engineering software, amounting to well over 100 ISIC level industry sectors worldwide, and the mapping of engineering applications to industries ranges from large-scale or general-purpose systems that are used broadly across, say, aerospace, auto, or AEC, to the many specialized applications that address specific requirements in specific industries. For example, there might be systems developed specifically for designing car seats through to systems specifically for cable tray design in process plants. Our third dimension is product lifecycle scope. Engineering software, I'm sure you know, started by supporting the conceptual and detailed design stages of the product lifecycle. But today, the product lifecycle is seen much more as a seamless continuum from concept through to product or facility retirement, and is supported by a set of highly integrated systems. So the scope of engineering software has expanded to meet these broader requirements. Finally, there's the geographic scope. Engineering software is a global market, and as a result, there's a complicated mixture of worldwide players, regional players, and local heroes. The US, in terms of distribution of the market, is about 20% of the global market. Then Japan's about 11%, Germany about 10%. China's currently about 5%, but projected to grow a bit more quickly, so should increase slightly as a percentage share. Now, from an investment point of view, there are several major factors that make the engineering software market attractive. The first is growth. So why should engineering software continue to be a growth market? But one factor is that users tend to acquire engineering software whatever their circumstances, because the benefits range from reduced costs and streamlined product development processes through to better designs, the ability to handle more complex products, and even support for the integrated product lifecycle management model that I mentioned just now. Also, engineering software is attractive to firms of all sizes. even small players need to acquire the technologies to enable them to participate in today's highly integrated and IT-enabled supply chains. So let's have a look at a chart. This shows the growth in 2014 over 2013 by high-level industry sector. I should say that estimates of the size of the engineering software market vary hugely. I mean, we've seen estimates anywhere from $10 billion US to 50 billion. But as always, it's important to be clear about what's being measured. For example, measuring third-party services associated with PLM accurately, while it's often bundled into market estimates and is a large amount of revenue, is next to impossible. So in our analysis, we include software revenues, that's licenses, subscriptions, and maintenance, and the services provided by the software vendors themselves. And that gives us a total market of around 26 billion US dollars for 2015, if we include the embedded software tools that I mentioned earlier. The market overall maintains a pretty reasonable rate of growth. It grew 4.9% in 2014 over 2013, which is not too bad in the current world economy. And we anticipate a slight acceleration up to 5.8% in 2017 over 2016. So the second attractive aspect of the market is the high instance of new opportunities. The market certainly has its mature bits. In fact, there are a lot of those, and it also has its very competitive areas. But the full product lifecycle perspective that we talked about just now means that engineering software is being adopted more broadly all the time. So in manufacturing industries, this might be supporting new ways of providing after-sale maintenance and support, closing the loop between innovation and field operation, or greater collaboration in product development, or even integration with smart networks for managing production. In the AEC industries, the growing use of building information management to integrate not only facility design, but also its operation across its lifetime, is generating numerous new application and integration technology opportunities. And finally, the technologies that provide the infrastructures for engineering software like cloud, Internet of Things, mobile computing and so on are also moving very fast. The third investment consideration is exit opportunity. We've talked about the market continuing to grow in scope and the opening up of new opportunities, and that the big players are now competing largely on comprehensiveness rather than individual product functionality. This supports the trend towards full lifecycle management and also the trend to enterprise licensing of entire application portfolios and so on. But the big vendors can't develop everything, so consequently the recent history of the market has featured a string of strategic technology acquisitions by the dominant companies, and prominent examples that come to mind are PTC's activity in acquiring technologies in the Internet of Things and embedded software spaces, or Bentley Systems' continuous program of acquiring applications to enable it to cover the entire infrastructure design and management map. This market dynamic will undoubtedly continue, so for businesses with the right technologies or market footprints, there are excellent exit opportunities. So the engineering software market spans almost all parts of the world, covers a huge number of industries, and includes a huge number of products for a wide range of activities. And like most markets, it has its mature areas where growth is modest but steady and entry difficult, its growth hotspots and its white spaces. And of course, many customers have made substantial investments in their engineering software infrastructure with well-established incumbent product sets supporting their product lifecycle workflows. So while the market offers great opportunities for investors, identifying and analysing those opportunities requires a high level of rigour. Now, of course, a company's financial position and the capabilities and experience of the leadership team are primary investment criteria, but it's also vital to understand its technology in the context of market trends and competitor capabilities, and it's also necessary to look at the range of things including market size, market penetration, growth outlook for each of the target industries, the regions and segments to be addressed, the channels to market, pricing and licensing models, and so on. So we would suggest that the starting point for evaluating investment opportunities is a comprehensive market landscape that brings together all of the relevant factors. So let's have a look at a typical market landscape and what it should cover. The first aspect is overall market structure, that is the types of customer and software provider, what customers buy and why they buy it. The second is types of business model that prevail in that area of the market sector, especially with a view to the prospects for a disruptive one. So this aspect of the landscape includes the commercial frameworks in the sector, including pricing, licensing, and so on. And then, of course, the third factor is to look at the trends in all of these areas. Then there's quantitative market information, size, predicted growth for the segments of interest, and so on. And a market landscape like this can be tuned according to the stage of the investment analysis. Excuse me. So if a specific target company has been identified, each of these areas will focus on the opportunity for that company, and we can add profiles of likely competitors into the picture. Equally, rather than on a specific company, the landscape might be focused on, say, a specific vertical slice of the engineering software market. So, say, CAD, or embedded software, or simulation and analysis, or even a sub-slice of that, say, CFD. So, the objective of the Cambashi and Intrinsim partnership and the ISPES program in particular is to support the phases of the entire investment life cycle as required. So from development of the early stage market landscape through to ongoing support of the company's operations post-investment. And to do this, we combine Cambashi's comprehensive market data with Intrinsim's extensive domain expertise. So I'd like to just focus on the market data aspect and show you the kind of data that we're talking about. And to do that, I'll try to illustrate some of the typical things that investors have used the data to find out. But first, just to explain, the Cambashi databases fit into three groups: engineering software, economic data, and focused markets. We call the databases observatories, and the 4 engineering software observatories provide different views on that market. So revenues by product, spend by country, spend by industry, and then the 4th contains our estimates of software provider revenues by industry. The economic observatories map employment type and value added to the industry segments, and then the 3 focus market ones cover tools for embedded software development, computer-aided manufacturing, and the digital simulation tools used for computer-aided engineering. A key attribute of the data is that it comes from multiple sources and at multiple levels. So what we might call top-down sources of published economic data include government stats for individual countries, material from World Bank, OECD, IMF, UN, and a number of proprietary sources. And then we mix in published material from vendors as well as bottom-up in-country research and triangulate the whole lot and continuously improve the data using this iterative, refined, constrained, converge process that results in consistent data across the multiple views. Overall, the data covers some 112 industry sectors in 53 countries to a pretty high level of resolution. In fact, in total, the databases on this chart add up to something over 2 million data points. Now, I'd like to show you some charts of the kind that we provided in support of investment analyses, but before I do, I have to keep the lawyers happy with a small disclaimer. I'm told that I have to point out that the purpose of the data here is only to show the kind of information that we have provided to investor clients in the past, that the numbers are Cambashi estimates, and of course that the observatories are changing and developing all the time. So with that out of the way, here's a typical view of end-user spending on engineering software for an industry. In this case, the target high-level sector was the collection of industries that comprise the machinery industry. And this shows the top 40 countries, so we can see America's in there in the blue zone, APAC in orange, and EMEA in green. And as we might expect, the largest spenders on engineering software for machinery industries are the US, Japan, and Germany. Now, while this is a great overview, as we said earlier, engineering applications can often be very focused, and that was indeed the case for this analysis. So it's useful to be able to drill down into the constituent parts of the high-level industry. So let's have a look at the subsectors that comprise the overall machinery industry, and here they are, these 16 each bar shows the worldwide spend on engineering software for one of the subsectors. And we can add in growths. So in this particular investment case, we were interested in the lifting and handling equipment and mining, quarrying and construction machinery sectors. So we can see that the data gives us the market sizes for growths for engineering software in those sectors. So for example, lifting and handling, you can see 183 million in 2014, growing to 254 million in 2019. So that's the kind of view we can do of industry spending on engineering software. Let's have a look at a different perspective, vendor revenues. So this is an extract from the product observatory that we did for a project a couple of years ago, but you can see that, as the name suggests, the product observatory tracks revenues associated with engineering software products, or more accurately, product groups. So we have the set of products of interest for the region of interest. In this case, it was the Americas, and it's broken down into new licenses, maintenance and subscriptions, professional services and other. And then by combining product revenue information and industry spend information and applying a bit of additional research, we can also get to estimates of provider revenues by industry. So here's a view showing Cambashi's estimates of provider revenues for the high-tech sector in the Americas. For this chart, we selected 14 of the providers that are covered in the product observatory, with the rest in others. Perhaps I should point out that for companies like Oracle, the numbers that we want are not the whole of Oracle, but just the part that matches our definition of engineering software, and the same is true for all providers. Finally, I'd just like to show you some employment data because it can often provide useful insights into markets, and in fact the previous charts all show what we call the addressed market. That is, they show current or projected spending or revenues. But the typical use of employment data by both vendors and investors is to look at potential market size. So this chart's an extract showing the employment category of professional engineers in AEC worldwide. No real surprise that the majority are civil engineers, but in this case, the software application that we were looking at was an architectural tool. So the main role of interest was architects, and we can see that the worldwide population is about 1.3 million. Of course, the real value is when we drill down to countries, which is very easy by filtering the data. So here's where you'll find those 1.3 million professionals in engineers, architects category. America's on the left, APAC in the middle, and EMEA on the right. By headcount, China, India, Russia, and Japan have the greatest number. As an aside, it's interesting that Japan has more architectural engineers than the US, but this kind of outcome is very useful in stimulating further analysis to obtain the explanation. So maybe in Japan, the restricted land area per head of population and the likelihood of earthquakes probably result in more work for architects. And we know anyway that the rules in Japan say that architects must supervise construction. Of course, a head count is not a direct indication of potential market, and you have to be careful in how you use employment numbers for that purpose. For example, new technology usually affects employment patterns, so not all of these people will be there because technology will automate some of their jobs. And each country is probably at a different phase of adoption of engineering software. But overall, employment data is a useful tool for modelling scenarios of market penetration with price, for example, and indeed for assessing the impact of new propositions that might enable different role types to become users. I hope that's a useful bit of insight into how market data can be exploited as part of the analysis process for investment opportunities. But now I'd like to hand over Joe, if I can handle the technology, to discuss the domain expertise aspect. So Joe, I'm going to try to make you the presenter. Maybe you could just test that and see if that's working.
I cannot change the slide, Tony.
Okay. Would you like to try now, please? Yeah.
That's working much better.
I think you have it.
Well, as Tony mentioned, the ISPIS program was put together to combine both the market data, the extensive market data is available from Cambashi, with domain expertise. So the market data is going to give us one perspective and input into the potential of what we can achieve. And the domain expertise is going to allow us to understand the feasibility of actually trying to get there. So I'm going to cover a little bit of background of Intrinsim and what the domain expertise is, but I'm just going to give a highlight of some of our principles and resources that we have available, but not go into full detail. And then I'm going to discuss the ISPIS program itself. So I'm going to go through some of the principles, and we appear to have jumped one too fast. And the first principle I'm going to talk about is Bob Bean. Bob Bean works with us. He's actually a resource for Intrinsim, and Bob's been in the CAD/CAM industry for about 30 years with a strong executive experience, strong entrepreneurial experience, very strongly related to design and manufacturing. And Bob has recently started a new company called Acoustic Stream. The next resource that we have available is actually an Intrinsim principle. It's Omar Ibrahim. Omar brings a strong background in simulation, in technology, everything from being a user to being the lead developer to sales and marketing and bringing leading edge technology to market, focused on finite element analysis and simulation and design optimization. The next resource that I'm going to speak about is Ed Lizinski, who's recently joined our team as a resource. Ed comes with about over 40 years of experience in research and development, product engineering, and very strong experience in systems engineering. And included in this experience is 32 years of service with IBM and 4 years with Dassault Systèmes, with some of the leaders. And Ed is very actively involved in steering groups and committees related to NAFEMS and COSI, very actively involved in the systems engineering and simulation communities. One of the Intrinsim principles is Karl-Heinz Peters, who handles international business development. Karl-Heinz brings a strong experience, about over 35 years in various roles in executive management for different companies in the engineering software space. Included in that is his time in his Intrinsim and spatial, focusing a lot on component software technology, which opens Karl-Heinz up to a lot of experience of multiple business models in various different industries in contacts throughout the industry. And then the last resource that I'll talk about is myself. And I've founded Intrinsim in 2010, and I come with a strong executive management background, similar background to Karl-Heinz, and with Symmetrics and Intrinsim and Spatial, a strong background in component software. So the idea is that we can bring together the expertise of anything from software development to bringing products to market to financial plans, product plans, go-to-market plans, so we can understand what it takes to actually be successful in this market and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and be able to review the potential of any given opportunity. So now that we've covered the domain expertise, I'm going to go back and talk about how the ISPIS program works. The ISPIS program really has two fundamental principles. The first principle is that by combining market understanding through the market data from Cambashi with the domain expertise provided by Intrinsim, that it enables better investment decisions and better portfolio performance. The second principle is that the services can be configured to suit the phase of the investment process and to suit the particular investor or situation at hand. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's actually fit to make it work. And these three major phases that we talk about are planning, validation, and deployment. So in each of these three phases, we have specific deliverables and specific projects schemes set up so that we can deliver to meet the requirements and help investors in each of these phases. I'm going to go through these in detail individually. So starting with the investment planning. In the investment planning, we have three different deliverables that are available. There's a market segment highlight, which is a 1/2 day on-site briefing by one consultant, highlighting the trends and issues for a particular market segment. There's also then a market segment review. This is a little bit more in depth than the highlight. This is a full 1 day on-site briefing by two consultants, typically a market data expert and a domain expert, combining both the market data and the domain expertise. And then we also have custom briefings where we'll put together a briefing for a specific objective or a particular format to meet the needs of the investor at that time. In the investment validation, we offer 3 different services there. The first is an investment opportunity commercial appraisal. So this is the idea of reviewing the market potential strategies and the infrastructure of the potential candidate for the viability, potential issues, risks, understanding what is the current situation and the potential opportunity and risks. And similarly, we can also do a similar appraisal related to technology. So competitiveness, readiness, implementation plans. And we can take the risk factor into account. We can also do custom appraisals to achieve certain things. One commonly custom appraisal would be to do a comprehensive appraisal combining both a commercial and a technology appraisal. And then in the investment deployment side of things, so that the planning stage is to understand the market, understand the general situation. The validation is to understand and evaluate a particular investment opportunity. And the deployment is to actually improve the success of an opportunity after investment. So here, Intrinsim and its resources can put together some management assistance to deal with interim and ongoing management to help either in the role of filling a gap for a particular period of time while trying to find particular executives that are expertise that's lacking, or to act as an advisory board or on the board of directors. We can act as an assistance for strategic direction as well as short-term gap filling until the appropriate management team is found. So coming back in summary, the ISPIS program takes the Cambashi data for the understanding the market and combines that with the domain expertise that Intrinsim brings to bear with its resources and principles. With the general objective is that the combination of these is more than 1 + 1 and can lead to better investment decisions and better portfolio performance. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Tony.
Okay, you might want to move us on to the last slide, Joe. And if you can figure out how to give me back control, that'd be great. But I'm reluctant to sort of waste more time. So thanks, Joe. I hope that the material that we've covered has been useful in terms of setting out why the engineering software market is an attractive proposition for investors, the range of factors that need to be considered, and how Cambashi and Intrinsim can help not only in early assessments of investment opportunities, but also following through with detailed evaluations and even post-investment support. I'm sorry that due to my sort of fumbling with the technology, we've bumped up against the scheduled end time for the session, but I see that a number of questions have actually arrived in the chat panel during the course of our talk, which is great, and it would be good to answer at least some of them. If you do have to leave us now, I hope that you found the session useful, and we will be pleased to have a follow-up discussion at any time, be it to discuss any aspect of what we've talked about, or indeed if you have any feedback, always very grateful to receive that, and we can be reached on either of those, Joe and I, on those emails there. But if you're able to stay with us for a few minutes, perhaps we'll overrun a little and to cover some of the questions. So working on a sort of first come first served basis, the first question was one about market data. I think it says, you mentioned briefly growth in China, but wouldn't you say that there is a lot of uncertainty about China right now? I guess I should pick that one up, Joe. But okay. Well, yeah. I mean, this is a good point, and we do get asked about the impact of the global economic situation quite a bit. I have to say that it actually opens up a very broad topic about the whole accuracy of official data, and we could have a long discussion about that because currently I think it's pretty good to be rather skeptical about much of the official data that's being published. And I would say not only in China, but if I dare, I'd say in Europe and the US too. But well, let me just say that first of all, we take economic forecasts from a large range of sources, as I mentioned earlier, so country stats, World Bank, OECD, and so on, as well as proprietary sources. And first of all, that means that we can compare and then take our own view on the accuracy of those numbers, and then we build them into our models that handle the way that engineering software sales respond to economic growth, along with our factual and research-based sources of bottom-up information that I think I mentioned earlier. Then we've got that iterative convergence process that I talked about, which actually runs into hundreds of checks on data consistency. I mean, an example of a very simple one would be, say, that we expect the total spending on engineering software in a region to be pretty much equal to the vendor plus channel revenues for that region, say. So overall, we're aiming to get all of the data sets to hang together. And I think by doing that, we get pretty good results in spite of the reservations, can I say, about official data sources. Okay, the next one's also about data, Joe, so I guess I'll field that. It says, in looking at the market, I find it hard to compare one company's estimate of a market sector with another's, even from vendor to vendor. So how would I reconcile your view of a market sector to, say, a major vendor's? And, excuse me, the first thing to say is that the right segmentation is critical for getting the right answers from any market data. And not being able to compare like with like is a very common problem that, frankly, limits the value of market data if you can't sort it out. Our approach has been to compile the data at a very granular level. I think I talked about over 100 industry sectors. We have product revenue data for getting on for 80 products that represent over 80% of the market. The employment data covers some 150 occupations and so on. So not only does that enable us to develop pretty detailed views of slices of the market, it also means that we can map the data to pretty much any higher level segmentation that the user wants. I mean, I think I would claim that we've not had an issue with replicating the segmentations used by the main players in the market. But yeah, understanding what the segmentation underpinning the data that you're looking at is absolutely critical, and I agree totally with the point. The next one is more generally about what we're offering, so maybe I can ask Joe to answer this time. Joe, you might be able to see it on your panel, but it says, what prompted you to create the ISPES program?
Okay, I'll address that one.
Yeah.
Cambashi's been providing market data and research for several years, including some projects with investors, while Intrinsim has been providing go-to-market services and technology licensing to help engineering software vendors be successful. Over the last few years, Cambashi and Intrinsim have been collaborating together to try to leverage the two aspects to improving the success of engineering software vendors in the market in general. And in that, we felt there was an opportunity to enable investors to better understand the engineering software and to improve their success for investments by leveraging the synergy of data that's available, the synergy that's available of the data from Cambashi and the domain expertise from Intrinsim. That was prompted because we felt that there were actually several good opportunities for growth and investment, and we thought that by combining these things together, we kind of got a 1 + 1 = 3 relationship that investors could leverage. And that's our hope, is to provide a service that's highly valuable.
Okay, very good. Actually, the next one's also about the program, so I think I'll throw this one over to you again, Joe. Can you explain how the management assist service that you described might work?
Okay. The intention of the Management Assist program is to do exactly what it says, is to assist with the management either with transition or long-term strategies. And so it's to improve the potential of things being successful. Somewhere during the acquisition process, there might have been determined that there is a particular vacancy in a particular role, let's say a VP of marketing or a VP of strategy or a VP of R&D. The resources at Intrinsim and the principals of Intrinsim can step in as an interim management while the long-term appropriate candidate is found, or they can also provide longer-term advisory roles, either as an advisory board member or as part of the board of directors. And so that the idea is that long-term strategy support and short-term interim day-to-day management support are the two possibilities of this. It's not intended to do long-term day-to-day management.
Yeah. Okay, Joe? Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm just with an eye on the time. Here's another question about data. You talked about employment data for understanding market potential. I'd like to hear a bit more detail on that. Well, I think what I'd say is that we found that using employment data, usually in conjunction with other data sets, can give some really interesting insights into market behavior. So, for example, we would use the employment data set and the industry data set together to look at things like average spend on software per engineer, say. So, for example, it would be possible to look at the average spend per engineer, or even subtype of engineer, as we saw earlier, in the AEC sector, or even subsectors of the AEC industry for a country or set of countries. Something like spend per engineer not only provides guidance on sustainable price points, but can also lead to a useful analysis of market characteristics. So, for example, if the spend on technical applications or engineering software per civil engineer in one country is 3 times that in another, say, why is that? Are the types of application being used fundamentally different? Is it just that the market's price volume curve is different for the 2 countries? Perhaps it's even down to things like more prevalent use of unlicensed software in one country versus another. It's also very useful in the light of the trend to make applications available to a wider range of users through things like better packaging, lower price, ease of use, and so on. What's being called democratization of applications, because the employment stats can help to look at how the trade-off between, say, the lower price and greater volume that goes with democratization would work for a given combination of geography, industry sector, and application type, say. So I hope that's helpful. I think, just with an eye on the time, Joe, we should probably make this the last question, and I think it's another one for you. For the market highlight and market review briefings, can I select who the consultants are?
Okay, the briefings are all set up and organized to meet particular goals, and so I'll go through each one individually. For the market highlight briefings, you can select, which is the half-day briefing of one consultant, you can select either a market data consultant from Cambashi or a domain expert from Intrinsim. We will try to select then the best consultants for the subject matter you're dealing with, but if you've got a strong preference for a particular consultant, we'll try to accommodate that. The market review briefing is a full day session with a market data expert and a domain expert. So that would tend to have one consultant from Cambashi and one consultant from Intrinsim. And again, we'll try to best match the consultants to the subject matter and account for your preferences. However, if you'd like to have a particularly different set of consultant mix, so maybe perhaps you would like to see 2 market data experts so you can really dive in, or 2 domain experts, we'll work with you to create a custom briefing. And in that case, it's the subject matter and the consultants that you are interested in, focused on addressing your particular interest. So the flexibility is there based on the custom briefing to do whatever you'd like, and there's some prepackaged organizations in the market highlights and the market review.
Okay, Joe, thanks. I think probably, given that we're now 10 minutes over, we probably ought to draw it to a close there. I mean, if you have any other questions, as I said, or any would like to talk about anything that we've talked about on the webinar today, then we'd be delighted to do so. And our emails are on the screen there. Or indeed, if you have any feedback you'd like to give us, we'd also love to hear that too. So, but with that, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for your attention and for taking the time to join us today, and perhaps look forward to involving you in a future webinar. Thanks very much indeed.